I've always been very involved in San Antonio. I was born and raised here, and education has always been near and dear to my heart. Well, frankly, they needed someone to take the position of executive director that knew the community, who could get the community to be enthusiastic about a university on the south side of town. And having been here and very active, I think that's the reason that they selected me or asked me if I would join them to do exactly that. And that's how that came to be. However, was executive director because at that time it was a system center of Kingsville. And we were they had been in a couple of trailers before I got there at Palo Alto. And then when I got there, we had a little elementary school on Gillette. And at the time, it was only juniors and seniors. It was upper level, not yet a 4-year university as it is now, though we worked really hard to get it there. So when Governor Perry declared that it would no longer be a system center, but it would be a standalone university, immediately the regents started looking for a president for that university, and they made me interim president. And then they had a national search, but asked me to apply as well, and I did. And as destiny would have it, then I was the sole finalist and was there really at A&M San Antonio as a CEO or president for 7 years. I admired Senator Madla quite a bit, and again, I'd met him socially, a few times, really liked him. And then his tragic death, and from my understanding, it was just a few days after the legislature, after 10 years of struggling of his fight for this university, actually passed that he died in that tragic accident. We owe everything to Senator Madla. And people that worked with him like Greg Garcia, who I believe you're going to be interviewing, if you haven't already, that were with him the entire time. What a man. And that's why we had a statue built to him on that campus. The most important statue that will ever be there is the one of Frank Madla. What a guy. He was wonderful. He's the one that called me and said, what would it take to have you come work for us? Before then, I had met with Dr. Frank Ashley, who was his person for academics for the entire system. And a 1-hour lunch turned into 3 hours as we spoke about the vision for A&M San Antonio and what they needed. And he said, Maria, I believe you're it. There's one other person that I want you to talk with, and that was Stanton Calvert. And Stanton Calvert led the legislature he was our legislative liaison for the entire A&M system. And the same thing happened there. Stan and I were going to meet for lunch, and we spoke for hours. And it was after that Chancellor McKinney called me and said, okay, young lady, what is it going to take for us to have you come work? And of course, I love A&M. Yeah. It's a wonderful school. I loved getting my doctorate there. Oh my goodness, it was a 3-year process. It was challenging and exciting at the same time, because when you have to go through that process, it only makes you better. Because you really you have to be very clear on dotting every I and crossing every T. And all of that is done for the good of your students, to make sure that they're well taught and prepared when they graduate. So it was such a joy after many visits and many sleepless nights when it came back with no recommendations. We had a clean 100%, no questions asked, and that was the most amazing day. By that time, John Sharp was our chancellor, and I called him and said, I called him Jefe, which means boss. So to this day, I would call, him Jefe. I said, Jefe, are you sitting down? Guess what? The next thing he had emailed, sent it out to all the regions that we had gotten 100%. And so it was such a joy to be able to do that before I left to take over the work with Mexico and South America.
What was the most difficult part about that process?
I think that it has so many areas, and then you have to make sure, obviously, that your faculty is right on point with what you're teaching. There's a lot of criteria, and as a brand new university, we had a lot of part-time professors, and that, you have to have full-time people, a percentage, and so to find the right full-time people who were willing to work in an elementary school, and then also to come and to work where there's only one building, because the Madla was our first building, and our College of Business moved 2 or 3 times while I was there, somewhere else, and then finally to Brooks. And, that's not easy. No. And so being able to, and also to have really competitive salaries for our faculty, which is really important. And so those were the difficult things, but we worked like heck through those. And a lot of my conversations, private conversations with a lot of our legislators had to do with just that. And many of them were so supportive, and they really believed that in the whole dream and vision of Frank Madla. Many of them had worked side by side with him for so many years. I had a very close connection with Alamo Colleges immediately so that we could start working closely, and we tried very hard that for the numbering system of courses that we could match, so that when students came from Alamo colleges, because faculty can be a little cranky and want this, but no, we can't do that. It's about working together to do the very best for our students as well as for their subject, for our faculty as well as the ones at the Alamo colleges, to come together as a team. I always said, and Bruce Leslie and I, and now Mike Flores, that head up Alamo colleges, our students are your students are our students. And at that time, since we were upper level only, it was like a united effort. We worked closely with Representative McClendon, who worked so hard, and of course she passed away a few years ago, but to get that done. We weren't totally successful, but with time, it's beginning to come more and more clear how important that is, and actually there's some initiatives and things are moving well in that direction, and I'm so grateful. Teaching, our students, our faculty worked along with experienced teachers together in the classroom. And instead of just a semester of observation and another semester where they worked, we did 18 months. And we were able to get the commitment from those school districts for the 18 months that our students were there to work under a master teacher. And our students were there early in the morning, late in the evening, just side by side with those teachers, and we actually took the coursework to the schools, so that, and for free, we allowed any already practicing teacher who felt they needed some help, like if we were teaching how the pedagogy of math, so how you best teach it but we had mathematicians along with us. And so then when our students graduated, they were first in line, because all of these school districts already knew our students. They knew their work ethic, they knew they could handle classrooms, they knew the curriculum, and they were the first ones hired. And that, for me, what a joy. What a joy. I knew that art would gap that bridge between who our students thought they could be and what they really could be. And that the art would tell them, you're home. I'm sorry, I'm such a crybaby, because students would come up to me and they'd say, Dr. Ferrier, that picture of the lady looking out her door crying with the mariachis, that's my grandma. Or that picture of that kitchen and the lady sitting, that's my house, that's where I grew up. And I'd say, yes, mija, because this is your home. This is your home. And you can be so proud you're here. So I got with Kathy and Lionel Sosa, with Joe Villarreal, all of those. When I found out that I could use 1% of what we had for buildings, I used it because it spoke to our students. And that art, for my inauguration, we ended up with a concert with 3 tenors, with classical music, because most of our students had never heard classical music. And then they would come to say to me, oh, that's what opera is like? I said, yes, that's what it, oh, I love it, I love it. They had never, and brought the chamber orchestra, the San Antonio Chamber Orchestra, to play. And our students were mesmerized because they'd never had, and that's part of being educated as well. And music, art, bridges to me the gap between the haves and the no-haves, and not have, because it speaks another language and it takes you to another height. When they take arts out of our schools, I am furious, because it is integral of who we are. It's our spirit. It's our spirit.